Hi everyone, we're down to the last stage of our app, which is to create the user interface for entering match data. So to do this, what I'm going to have to do is create a custom form rather than how we've created forms previously. So the first thing we want the user to be able to do is enter a date. Now there's date and time and there's date. I'm only interested in date, and that's fine, so that's no worries. The next one on the list is we need to be able to get the user to select a choice, and you'll see that when we do our choice data, we need to actually select the source. So we want to take from a list of teams that have been entered previously. So we're going to change that to team, and then when we do our selection, we get the 3 teams that we've entered. So again, the same thing again with the opposition. We want to do use a choice option, and we have the same issue that we need to select opposition, and that will give a bunch of choices that have been entered previously. So we've got our basic form, which is good. But one of the things which, again, you'll definitely run into as you're building one of these things is that you'll often need to do experimentation to see what works. And obviously, we initially envisaged that we would have all the match data with all the information on one tab. But what we've found just by experimentation is we can't fit all of these things on there. So to modify this app, we're going to end up having 2 match data screens. One which has the basic data, which we've just entered, and then a second one which will actually have the user clicking on it and creating the data. So we need to create another form to do that. And that form I'm going to call match data entry form. Okay. And I better get rid of the other junk at the end. Okay, so there we go. We've got all that set up. So to finish off this first form, what we want to do is we want to be able to navigate from one form to the next. So once this data has been entered, so in this case, and you can check that the data has been entered. So I'm going to put some values in here. Click OK, and I'm going to select the team, which is Women's Metro, and you'll see that the data has already been entered into there. So basically the default of this is it always enters the data into row 1. And you'll see I've been playing a little bit with the data as well. Okay, so the next step is we want to be able to navigate from this one, once we've entered that basic data, to the next one, so to the next sheet. So we need to add a button, and again, you should always make sure it's really obvious where the button is taking the user. So in this case, we're going to say start entering match data. Okay, that's all done. And then we just need a navigation like we've done previously, and the tab, we want to go to a tab, and we just need to define that tab. Okay, so once we click that, that part of it is done. Okay, so the next one we want to do, and this is really the screen that the user is going to use the most, is the forms. And in this particular case, what we want to do is rather than have the user having to enter a value, which is a bit difficult on a phone, we want them to be able to just click a button. Okay, so to do that, we're going to add another component, and in this case, I'm going to add button block. And the reason I'm adding button block is because it gives you 2 buttons, so we can have one for the opposition stat and one for our stat, and then we just need to set each one of these up. So the first one I'm going to set up is circle. Oops, actually does what I'm asking it. Circle entry us. Okay, now this particular action, unlike the actions we've done up to this date, is not a navigation action. We want to alter the data. So it's a data action, and this gives you all the possibilities. Not all of these I have tried, so therefore I don't know the answers to all of what all of these things will do. But I did experiment enough to work out that the incremental number is the setting we want. And what that incremental number will do is it will increase the value in the nominated field. So once we select that, you'll see that there's now an option, and it also gives you the capacity to increment by different amounts. So in this case, I'm interested in circle entry. So circle entry, and then that's all set up. Now I'm not going to bother, but I would normally click on that button, check that it is doing what we're expecting into the data, and that's always a good thing to do. All right, so the next one we'll do is circle entry, and that is them. Okay, and then we need to set up our action again, which is exactly the same. And this will get a little bit laborious because I've got to set up 8 buttons, but that's okay. Okay, so that one's done. And then we'll go to the next one that we want to set up, which is the, what are we doing next? Well, let's do short corners. Yes. Okay, increment. And that's the correct one we're interested in. Okay, so that's all done. And then we can go to the next one, which is going to be short corner them. Okay, same deal. Increment the value, select the correct field. Okay, so we've got the next one. We've got 2 more to set up. Okay, and another button block. Okay, and this time we might have shots on goal, maybe. I'm just going to put shots and increment the data and then select the correct field. So shots on goal us, and that's done. And then we need to go to the second one, which is shots then. Okay, and then we need to add one more button, which button block. Okay, and that's going to be repeat attacks. Okay, and then we've got our last one to do. Now this last one, because I've done it before, will not fit on the screen, so you'll get an overflow. So this is one of the limitations of this. You'll see that the label doesn't quite fit. So you could experiment with shortening the labels or doing something like that, but these are some of the limitations you will have associated with this type of program. Okay, so now we've got all of our data being entered. Now the next thing we wanted to do, which is a criteria of this, is we want the user, instead of just being able to click the button, they need to be able to see the data as it's being collated, so in real time. So to do this, what I'm going to do is I'm going to use the fields content. Now, when I was building this app, and obviously I've played around with this before building it in this particular video, is I had to spend time trying to identify which component I actually needed. So basically, it's one of those things where you usually should have a second app set up somewhere that you can experiment with to make sure that you work out what does what. And there'll be plenty of things in the class that you'll ask me, how do I do this? And I'll probably say, I don't know because I haven't done it before. Okay, so to set up the field, this one is pretty straightforward. So I'm going to add an item. And in this item, I'm going to have it in the same order that it appears in the up on the screen. And I don't need date. I'm not interested in the date. So I'm going to have circle entries us. I'm going to add an item, and I'm going to have circle entries them. And then I'm going to add an item, and it's going to be short corners this time. Short corners us, and add an item, short corners them. Okay, and we'll add another one, which is going to be shots. Okay. By the way, when I was actually creating this for the first time, I also found that in this particular item, and this is just things that you will need to work out for yourself as you go along, is I found that when I started trying to create this, when I first filmed the video, some of the values wouldn't appear, and the reason was because there was no value in the field. So if there's literally never been value put in the field, even though you may enter it as something you want on the screen, it will not appear. Okay, and then we've got, and these are again just experimental things you just have to play around with to make sure you understand what the defaults are for this particular program. So it is a lot of experimentation to get things to work, but that's okay. Okay, so now we've got all of our repeated text, and this is where we can test our buttons. So if we hit circle entry, you'll see that it goes up, and you'll see I'm clicking on circle entry them, and I haven't actually put in circle entry them. That would be helpful, wouldn't it? We better put in circle entry them, and okay, and then I wonder if you can drag this up. Again, haven't experimented with this before. That's annoying. It's not going to let me do it. So you can see, again, I'm sort of experimenting on the fly, and I realize I can't actually drag this up, or can't work it out at this very second. So therefore, what I'm going to do, just to get the thing to work, is we'll just have to reset everything, which I'll quickly do. So circle entries them, short corners us them. Okay, I think that's everything. That's right. Okay, I think that's all right now. Okay, so now we've got all of our data, and then if we go through and just test the button, so that button should rise by 1. The circle entry, yep, rise by 1. Yep. This is a way of just, whoop, I haven't set this button here properly. Okay, right, so I better go back to this one, and I haven't set the task here properly, and this is shots on goal, I think it was. Okay, so let's check that one. Yep, that's working. Okay, so everything's now working. Now the next thing I'm going to do is I want to make sure that I think it makes more sense to have the fields that we have on top so that people can see the value, and as they're entering the data, it appears. Okay, so the next thing we want to do is we want to allow the user to store the data. Now this is another experimentation thing that I went along before doing this and found there was a problem and had to think about a way to solve it. So the default in this particular program is that when you add a component, it only alters the first line of data, which means if we want to store the data, if we add data again, it's going to overwrite what's there already. So we need to be able to get it to create that, create the data. Okay, so or save the data. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to put in a button, and it's going to be save the data. So I'll put in a button. Okay, and what we might do, or actually before we do save the data, we might do reset. We need a reset button to set everything back to 0. Values. Okay, and then again, in this case, this is a data one, and this is where we want to set column values. So for this one, we can actually put in, if we want to reset all of the values, okay, so we want the short corner to go back to 0, we want the circle entry, all of these to go back to 0, if we decide halfway through that we want to do that. Okay. Set values, so if I then click it, it resets all the values, and then we can start collecting data again. So that's really nice and easy to do. Okay. Now, once you've got that working, then the last thing we want to do is we want to add yet another button, and we want this to be able to save the data. Okay. So once the user has finished, we're going to save the data. Put save data. Okay, and then we need to get it to do a couple of things. Okay, and so the couple of things that we want it to do is we want to get it firstly to create a new line of data. So if I have data and I say add new row, okay, and I click save data, much data, okay, and click save, hopefully what should happen is when I go to my data table, it's created a new line of data. Now, it's created that data and it's reset, it's taken a copy of all the values that are currently in all of the fields. So if we go back to here, it's collected all that data, it's taken a copy. So when a new line is added, it basically it says, right, that's the value. So effectively, you're saving that data to return to normal. Now, in addition to this, we want this button to do a few other things. So we need the button to be able to actually do multiple things at once. Okay, so if we go back to the button here at the moment, what we then want to do is we want to go to actions for match data. So we're going to create a new action. So what this does is it allows you to put in multiple actions into this thing. So basically that means this button is going to do multiple things in one click. So if we're going to save the data, we need to create that multiple row. But obviously when we re-enter the app after we've finished, we don't want to see all the data from the previous game. That's just going to be annoying. So we want to basically, once we've saved the data, we want to clear the row number 1. Okay, so I'm going to have set the columns. Okay, and I'm going to do the same thing I did on that reset button. Okay. And I'm going to reset the entire line of data. Okay, and that all works. Okay, and that's good. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to get to add a third action. So once the person has clicked save the data, that presumably means that they have finished entering all the data that they're interested in on that particular day, decided to save it. We want to save it, and then we logically you would then want the user to return to the main menu so that they can continue recording data for the next match or whatever it is that they're doing. So the last thing we want to do is we want to do a navigation, and we're going to go back to the hockey tab, which is the main menu, and then we're done. Okay, so hopefully this should then work. So we should have a save the data once I click the button, which I've just done. It returns to the main menu. If we have a look here, then we've got, oops, wrong data. We should have a line of data that's a new line that's been created that's empty, and then we've got our data below which we've stored. Okay, so that means that this app is now functional. Now, if I want to, I can then publish the app, okay, and you can, and it will create a link, and then you can publish it, and then you've got a working app. Alrighty, guys, I hope that was helpful and will allow you to be able to create your own fantastic apps. And as I said, when I was creating that, I had to struggle at different times to work out how to get it to do certain things, and that will certainly happen to you. What you're seeing is the final product after I've actually worked out how all the bits and pieces work. So that's really the key to getting the apps to work. All right, guys, have a great day, and we'll catch you next time.